So changing lives is well underway, and thank you for joining us on our journey. I beg Louisa Niehaus to join us yet again. She's a psychotherapist, relationship expert, and she specializes in trauma therapy. Welcome back yet again. I'm really excited to have you back on the show.
Thank you so very much, Tanya. Me too.
So what I'd love to try and do today is you work a lot with trauma therapy and so on, and I want to try and come to it from two different angles. From your angle, from a counseling perspective and from how you operate, and then I'm going to lean in from a neuroscience perspective, and let's see what the nuances look like.
Sure.
But if you have a typical patient that comes in and needs trauma counseling, which I'm sure has been on the up and up since COVID, what would your typical methodology look like?
When you have a recent traumatic event, there are often unresolved traumatic issues that appear that have happened in the past. So unresolved trauma becomes compounded, and then when you have a recent traumatic event, it seems to unpack or unravel a lot of the trauma that has preceded or has been unresolved. And it kind of makes the trauma even more acute.
Absolutely. So when I look at it from the perspective of in the brain, we live a lot in the amygdala, your fight, flight, or freeze. And I mean, as we know, the primal brain's been around for 450 million years, and we're really good at being fearful. And what I find is when I'm dealing with clients that have gone through processes that I'm working with, we lean into what the knee-jerk primal reaction to that could have been and where it stems from. And do you often find it goes right back to childhood, those formative 1 to 7?
It can, yes. But what you're speaking about in terms of the amygdala response is just so pertinent, Tanya, because it is our primitive experience in life that will keep us alive, is that fight or flight response. And when that gets out of whack, that's when we see a lot of symptoms of, for example, post-traumatic stress disorder or very high anxiety disorders. But if that wasn't in place, the fight or flight response, we would most likely die, because it is a very primal response that is so necessary for our survival. But where it becomes unsettling or dysfunctional is when it continues long after the trauma or the stress has finished.
And the hormones that are being produced from it on a perpetual basis, if you've got chronic fight, flight, or freeze being emitted in your body, obviously would be namely cortisol and epinephrine. And, you know, if you're not using these, so the cortisol will obviously cause things like depression, which I'm sure you see a tremendous amount, and I actually would like to lean into depression in a moment. Lack of sleep, eating disorders, knee-jerk reactions with your partner, being oversensitive. There are a consortium of knock-on effects just from the production of that particular hormone. So let's just lean a little bit into depression, because I think that's been pertinent in these times.
A lot of people, sadly, are suffering the after effects of lockdown, being socially isolated, having had their adrenal glands overstimulated by the shock, possibly of a pandemic, or encountering something like this that we never expected to encounter in our lifetimes. And it has led to depression. People have lost their jobs left, right, and center. People have seen their circumstances change. So trauma, depression and anxiety, for me, are normal responses to a set of highly abnormal events.
And socially isolated, I want to lean into as well. You know, and what I've found has happened with a lot of my patients is that they've had to look inward, especially if they've been by themselves. And to actually look inward to who they are has been incredibly difficult for them. Just in closing, have you found the same?
I have. And also remember, looking inward is not for everybody. The only time where we have been in the state of enforced looking inwardness is maybe if you have to be incarcerated or you choose to go off and be in a monastery.
Absolutely.
So this has been very, very disturbing for people whose mindset, it's not their general mindset to go with it.
So they weren't ready for it, and it was a shock.
No.
And they obviously got thrown through this. Oh, thank you so much for leaning into this with me again. And I think it's amazing. I'd love to expand a lot more on how people can look introspectively the next time I coerce you into coming back onto my show.
Thank you, Tanya.
Thank you so much.